Nathan Carter stood in front of the glass skyscraper, gazing up at the towering headquarters of Carter Industries. He had built this empire from nothing, transforming it into one of the most successful tech firms in the country. But today, no one would recognize him. Dressed in a plain button-up shirt and worn-out jeans, he looked nothing like the billionaire CEO he was. The plan was simple: apply for an entry-level position and see firsthand how his company treated job candidates. Rumors of corruption in the hiring process had reached him, but his executives had brushed them off. He needed proof. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The grand lobby was exactly as he had designed it: sleek, modern, intimidating. Employees rushed past him, their suits crisp, their expressions serious. No one gave him a second glance. Approaching the front desk, he was met with a young receptionist who barely looked up from her phone. "Yeah?" she muttered, her tone dismissive. Nathan forced a polite smile. "I have an interview today." "Nathan Carter." She rolled her eyes, typing lazily into the system. ID. Nathan handed over a fake resume, created with just enough experience to qualify. A nobody on paper. Just another applicant. The receptionist scanned it, then sighed. "Take a seat. They're running late." Nathan glanced around. Several other candidates sat nearby, their faces tense with anticipation. He wasn't alone in this experience. As he sat down, he overheard whispers. Frustrated applicants talking about how the company's hiring process was rigged. Nathan's stomach tightened. Had his worst fears been correct? Nathan sat in the waiting area, listening to the murmurs of frustration around him. A young man in a navy suit tapped his foot anxiously, checking his watch every few seconds. Next to him, a woman in her 30s sighed heavily, gripping her resume with white-knuckled fingers. "I heard they don't even read half of these applications," the young man muttered under his breath. "They just pick people they already know." Nathan's ears pricked up. He turned slightly, pretending to scroll through his phone while listening. The woman beside him shook her head. "That wouldn't surprise me. I've applied 3 times. Perfect credentials, years of experience. Never even got a call back." Nathan's jaw tightened. His company prided itself on meritocracy, on giving everyone a fair shot. But these people? They were saying the opposite. A sleek glass door opened, and a sharply dressed woman in a tailored suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Next." The young man beside Nathan jumped up, straightening his tie. He walked in with confidence, disappearing behind the door. Nathan glanced at the other applicants, some hopeful, some already defeated. Minutes passed, then 20, then an hour. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. He had expected professionalism, efficiency. Instead, applicants were left waiting with no explanation. Finally, the woman reappeared. She looked right past Nathan and called another name. Nathan stood. "Excuse me, my interview was scheduled for an hour ago." The woman barely glanced at him. "If your name wasn't called, just wait." Nathan felt something twist in his gut. Was this how candidates were treated here? Was this the company he had built? Something was very, very wrong. Nathan checked his watch. It had now been almost 2 hours since his scheduled interview time. His patience was wearing thin. Across the waiting room, the young man who had gone in earlier returned. His face was flushed, his jaw clenched. He looked humiliated. A woman sitting nearby leaned toward him. "How did it go?" The man let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't even ask about my qualifications. Just said they were going in another direction." Nathan's stomach tightened. That didn't make sense. He had reviewed the hiring process himself. Every applicant was supposed to go through a structured interview with fair evaluations. Another name was called. Another applicant walked in, hopeful. Nathan watched the process repeat itself. Candidates went in, some returning within minutes, rejected before they could even make a case for themselves. Then, finally, his name was called. Nathan stood, adjusting his posture. He walked through the sleek glass doors, entering a minimalist, high-tech interview room. At the center sat a young hiring manager, mid-30s, expensive suit, an air of superiority. The man barely looked up. "Nathan Carter, right?" Nathan nodded. "Yes, sir." The hiring manager sighed. He picked up Nathan's resume and flipped through it carelessly. "All right, Nathan, let's get this over with." Nathan froze. That wasn't how an interview was supposed to start. Something was definitely wrong. Nathan sat straight, keeping his expression neutral. He had been in thousands of meetings, but never one where he wasn't in control. The hiring manager leaned back in his chair, barely looking at Nathan. "So, why do you want to work here?" Nathan chose his words carefully. "I admire the company's vision. I believe in innovation, teamwork, and creating opportunities." The manager snorted. "Right. And what makes you think you'd be a good fit?" Nathan studied the man. His tone wasn't curious, it was dismissive, like he had already made up his mind. Nathan answered calmly, "I have years of experience in management and technology development. I know how to handle high-pressure situations and—" The manager waved a hand, cutting him off. Yeah. Listen, Nathan, you seem like an okay guy, but we have high standards here." Nathan's brow furrowed. "I understand, and I believe my skills align with those standards." The manager let out a dry laugh. "Sure, but let's be real. You don't exactly fit the profile of what we're looking for." Nathan's heartbeat picked up. He had seen no real evaluation, no actual interest in his skills. This wasn't an interview. It was an excuse to reject him. He leaned forward slightly. "And what profile would that be?" The manager smirked, shaking his head. "Thanks for coming in, Nathan. But we're going in another direction." Nathan sat there, staring. That was it? No discussion. No reason? Just dismissed? Something inside him snapped. He wasn't walking out of here without answers. Nathan didn't move. He held his gaze steady, watching the hiring manager shift uncomfortably. This was his company. His name was on the building. And yet, he had just been discarded like nothing. "I'd like to know why." Nathan's voice was calm, controlled. The manager sighed dramatically. "Nathan, I don't make the rules. It's just the way things work here." Nathan's jaw tightened. "The way things work?" The manager rolled his eyes. "Look, you don't fit the company culture, okay? That's the nice way to put it." Nathan's pulse spiked. "And what exactly is that culture?" He leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're rejecting candidates before they even get a chance." The manager smirked. "Listen, man, I can tell when someone's not a good fit. I've been doing this long enough." Nathan's expression darkened. "Long enough to decide within 2 minutes of meeting me?" The manager chuckled, shaking his head. "You're overthinking this. Trust me, it's nothing personal." Nathan exhaled slowly. Nothing personal. That was exactly the problem. This wasn't just happening to him. It was happening to countless others. And no one cared. He stood up, adjusting his shirt. "Well, I appreciate your time." The manager nodded, already looking past him. "Best of luck." Nathan walked out of the room, his hands clenched into fists. He had everything he needed. The proof, the lies. And now? It was time to expose them. Nathan strode out of the interview room, his pulse racing. Every instinct in him screamed that this was bigger than just one bad hiring manager. This was systemic. As he passed the waiting area, he noticed the same defeated expressions on the other candidates' faces. How many of them had been rejected just as quickly? He turned toward the receptionist. She barely glanced up. "Excuse me," Nathan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Who's in charge of hiring?" She sighed, tapping on her phone. "HR." Nathan leaned in slightly. "I meant specifically." She rolled her eyes, finally looking at him. "Mr. Davidson. But good luck getting a meeting with him." Nathan nodded. He had heard that name before. Richard Davidson, head of HR. He was the one who had been pushing for culture alignment policies. Nathan glanced at the hallway leading toward HR. He knew security would stop him if he just walked in, but that wouldn't stop him. He wasn't done yet. As he turned back to leave, he caught sight of the young woman who had spoken earlier about applying 3 times. She looked defeated, gripping her rejected resume. Nathan walked over. "Hey, can I ask you something?" She hesitated but nodded. "Have you ever actually been interviewed? Or do they just dismiss you like they did with me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "You too." Nathan exhaled slowly. That was all the confirmation he needed. He wasn't just going to expose this. He was going to destroy it. Nathan walked out of the lobby, his mind racing. This wasn't just about him. It was about hundreds, maybe thousands of people being shut out of opportunities without reason. He needed to get inside HR. Standing at the corner of the building, he pulled out his phone. A few taps, and he was in the company's internal network. Being the owner had its advantages. Employee records, hiring data, rejected applications, all right at his fingertips. Nathan's stomach twisted as he scrolled. Candidates were being sorted into 2 categories: priority and non-priority. Priority applicants had connections to upper management. Non-priority? They were discarded almost immediately, no matter their qualifications. His own name had landed in non-priority. They hadn't even checked his resume. Nathan's grip tightened on his phone. So this is what they had been hiding. Then, something else caught his eye. A report? It was a list of rejected applicants. The names had red flags next to them. But next to each one, there was no explanation, just a single word. Unfit. Nathan exhaled sharply. No criteria, no justification. Just dismissed. This wasn't just bad hiring. It was a rigged system, and he was going to burn it to the ground. Nathan stared at his phone screen, disbelief turning into anger. How many people had been turned away without a chance, just because they didn't fit some hidden agenda? He scrolled further, finding a pattern. Many of the priority hires had direct connections to executives, family members, friends, business partners. Then he saw it. Richard Davidson's son had been hired straight into a leadership role. Nathan's jaw tightened. So that was it. This wasn't about skills. This was about power, favoritism, and control. Nathan exited the system and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He had everything he needed. But he wasn't just going to fix this behind closed doors. He wanted them to feel the consequences. He walked back into the building, heading straight for the HR department. A security guard glanced at him but didn't stop him. He still looked like just another applicant. The door to Richard Davidson's office was closed. Nathan didn't knock. He pushed it open. Inside, Davidson sat behind a massive oak desk, typing on his computer. Davidson looked up, irritated. "Who the hell are you?" Nathan took a slow step forward, his voice calm but firm. "The man whose company you've been corrupting." Davidson's face froze. He had no idea what was coming next. Davidson's face shifted from irritation to confusion. "What are you talking about?" Nathan stepped closer, placing his hands on the desk. I own this company, and I just went through your rigged hiring process. Davidson's expression darkened. He let out a forced chuckle. That's ridiculous. You expect me to believe? Nathan pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. The company's hiring records flashed up, exposing every rejection, every prioritization of unqualified hires. Davidson's smirk vanished. You've been tossing out candidates without cause, ignoring talent, handpicking hires based on personal connections. Nathan's voice was like steel. And worst of all, you made this a culture. Davidson swallowed, his fingers twitching. This is a misunderstanding. Nathan's eyes burned into him. No, it's corruption. Davidson tried to recover. Look, Nathan cut him off. How many qualified people have you turned away? How many futures did you decide weren't fit? The silence stretched. Finally, Davidson's mask cracked. It's business. It's how the world works. Nathan's jaw tightened. Not anymore. He reached for the intercom on the desk, pressing the company-wide broadcast button. Davidson's eyes widened. Wait. Nathan's voice echoed through the building. This is Nathan Carter. Effective immediately, the hiring process at Carter Industries is being overhauled. Corruption will no longer be tolerated. Every employee froze, listening. Davidson's face drained of color. Nathan straightened, staring him down. And you? You're fired. Security entered the room. Davidson didn't fight. He knew it was over. Nathan watched as the man was escorted out. Then, turning to the intercom again, he spoke the words that would change the company forever. It's time we started hiring the right way. The office fell silent as Davidson was escorted out. Employees whispered, stunned. No one had ever seen a leader fall so publicly. Nathan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just happened. But there was still work to do. He turned to the HR assistant standing frozen near the door. Get me a full list of rejected applicants from the past year. Every single one. She hesitated, then nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Nathan leaned against the desk, rubbing his temples. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? How had his own company been so broken right under his nose? The phone on the desk buzzed. A text from one of his executives. Nathan, this is a PR nightmare. What are you doing? Nathan stared at the screen. They still didn't get it. He typed back, fixing my company. A knock at the door made him look up. It was the young woman from the waiting area, the one who had been rejected multiple times. She hesitated, then spoke. Does this mean people like me have a real chance now? Nathan met her gaze. Yes, and I promise you, you'll be judged on your talent, not on who you know. For the first time that day, she smiled. Nathan looked out the window, at the empire he had built. It had been poisoned, but now it had a future, and it would be rebuilt the right way. Nathan stood in the center of the office, feeling the weight of what he had uncovered. How many other departments had been poisoned by this corruption? He turned to the HR assistant, who had returned with a thick stack of files. These are all the rejected applicants? She nodded hesitantly. At least, the ones we have on record. Some applications were deleted. Nathan's fist clenched. Deleted. That meant some people weren't just rejected. They had been erased from consideration entirely. He flipped through the papers, his eyes catching familiar patterns. Highly qualified candidates dismissed without explanation. Family members of executives pushed through. It was worse than he imagined. A knock at the door made him look up. It was Michael, his most trusted board member. Michael stepped inside, his expression unreadable. Nathan, I need to know. How far are you taking this? Nathan met his gaze. All the way, Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. You just fired the head of HR. Investors are nervous. They're worried you're about to tear the company apart. Nathan didn't blink. I am, but only the rotten parts. Michael studied him, then nodded. Then let's do it right. Nathan exhaled slowly. He wasn't alone in this, and that meant change was coming. For good. Nathan sat at his desk, scanning through the rejected applications. So much wasted talent. People who had the skills, the experience, the passion, but never even got a chance. He picked up one resume. A software engineer with 10 years of experience. Rejected. Another. An Ivy League graduate. Perfect credentials. Rejected. His stomach tightened. How many careers had been sabotaged by this corrupt system? Michael sat across from him. We need a plan. Nathan nodded. First, we're reinstating every applicant who was unfairly rejected. Michael raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of people. Nathan didn't hesitate. Then we'll make room for them. Michael exhaled, then smirked. That's gonna shake things up. Nathan's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Be careful, Carter. Not everyone wants this system to change. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Michael noticed his expression. Something wrong? Nathan slowly placed his phone down. No, just someone afraid of what's coming. He leaned forward, his voice firm. Let's start rebuilding. The fight wasn't over, but he was just getting started. Nathan knew the backlash was coming. The moment he announced the hiring overhaul, his inbox exploded. Angry executives, nervous investors, people who had benefited from the old system weren't happy. A board member sent a single-word email. Reconsider. Another message came in from an anonymous number. You're making enemies? Nathan leaned back in his chair, unfazed. If these people feared change, it meant he was doing the right thing. Michael walked into the office, dropping a folder on Nathan's desk. Thought you should see this. Nathan flipped it open. A leaked internal memo. HR executives were planning to manipulate the new hiring system, finding loopholes to keep their own people in power. His blood boiled. They were already trying to undo what he had started. Nathan stood up, rolling his sleeves. Then we tightened the rules. No more backdoors, no more favoritism. Michael smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Nathan grabbed his phone and dialed a number. It was time for a company-wide meeting. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a war. Nathan stood in front of the massive conference table, facing the board of directors. The tension in the room was suffocating. Some executives stared him down, others avoided his gaze. Michael sat beside him, arms crossed. He was the only ally Nathan fully trusted. One of the senior board members cleared his throat. Nathan, we've reviewed your changes, and frankly, we're concerned. You're disrupting years of structure. Investors are uneasy. Nathan leaned forward. You mean the investors who benefited from this corruption? The board member's jaw tightened. That's not the point. Nathan exhaled sharply. No, it is. You don't want change. You want control. Another executive spoke. The way things were worked for a reason. Nathan slammed a file onto the table. Inside were the names of every talented candidate rejected for no reason. Did it work for them? His voice was cold, unwavering. Silence. The CEO straightened. This company was built on merit, and it will return to merit. If you don't like it, you can leave. A few executives exchanged glances. One stood up and walked out. Then another. Michael smirked. Looks like we're cleaning house. Nathan watched them go, then turned to the remaining board members. Now let's fix what's broken. For the first time in a long time, His company finally felt like his again. Nathan watched as the last of the corrupt board members walked out. The air in the room felt different, lighter, freer. For the first time in years, Carter Industries belonged to those who truly deserved it. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking. You just fired half the board. Investors are gonna lose their minds. Nathan exhaled slowly. Let them. The right ones will stay. He turned to his assistant. Effective immediately, every hiring manager involved in this scheme is terminated. We start fresh. The assistant nodded, already making calls. Nathan's phone buzzed. A news alert. CEO Nathan Carter exposes corrupt hiring practices in his own company. Execs resign amid scandal. He smirked. Good. Let the world know. A knock at the door made him look up. It was the young woman from the waiting room, the one rejected without reason. She hesitated, then held up a letter. I just got this. Nathan took it, unfolding the paper. His heart lifted. It was a job offer. Her eyes shimmered. You kept your word. Nathan smiled. I always do. For the first time in a long time, Carter Industries was truly open to everyone. And it was just the beginning. Nathan stood at the top floor of Carter Industries, looking down at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the skyline. It was a new day for his company, a new beginning. Michael walked in, holding a report. Applications have doubled since we announced the hiring changes. Nathan smirked. Good. That means people finally trust us again. Michael nodded. And the media? They're calling you the CEO who exposed his own empire. Nathan chuckled. I can live with that. A notification popped up on his phone. A message from an applicant he had never met. Thank you for giving people like me a chance. Nathan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what he had done. This wasn't just about a company. It was about people, about fairness, about rewriting the rules. He turned to Michael. We're not done yet. Let's keep building. Michael smirked. Now you sound like the Nathan I know. Nathan stepped forward, looking at the city one last time before heading back to work. He had torn down a corrupt system, and now he was going to build something greater,